Hi, welcome to Prime Recap. An engineer is stuck in the middle of the ocean together with his family in a colossal shark. His mission is to find a way to reach the shore without being devoured by this bloodthirsty beast. Today we will recap the story of the movie, The Black Demon from 2023. For hundreds of years, fishermen have shared stories of a mythical shark off the coast of Baja, Mexico. The creature became known as the Black Demon, and according to legend, he only appears when he is summoned. In the middle of the ocean are two men who have been sent on a mission, and Nacho dives in to do an inspection of the submerged structure of that floating facility. Realizing that the building is about to collapse, he decides to blow it up and places a bomb on the site. After doing so, the diver returns to the boat, but before he can reach the surface, a mysterious monster attacks him. Suddenly, Nacho begins to visualize hundreds of sea creatures swimming towards him, but this is only a mirage, and soon the man is eaten alive. When he hears a suspicious noise, his partner tries to contact him but gets no response and turns on the lights on the boat to help Nacho locate himself. However, in doing so, he signs his own sentence, for the shark manages to find him and devours him immediately. Paul and his family are making a trip to the Baja Peninsula so that he can conduct an inspection at one of the facilities of the oil company where he works. After that, the engineer and his family will take a few vacation days to get to know the country, since Ines is Mexican and wants to introduce her children to the culture. Paul's mission is the same as Nacho's, however, he has no idea that a man has already lost his life trying to execute it. Before leaving, Paul intends to leave his family in the same hotel where he met his wife 16 years ago, and Ines is startled when she arrives there, because she realizes that the people who live there are very different from how they used to be. When they finally arrives at the hotel, the family discovers that the place is closed and Paul goes to talk to some locals in search of a restaurant recommendation. Initially, the man is not well received, as Ray soon suspects that he works for an oil industry, since that is not a tourist town. Seeing that her husband is in trouble, Ines decides to intervene and uses all her sympathy to convince that man to help her family find a place to eat. When he realizes that the woman is Mexican, Ray decides to help them, and while walking through the streets, Paul realizes that the place is very empty. On the way, the family spots a shrine that was dedicated to Tlaloc, the Aztec god, and Ray claims that this altar was erected so that Tlaloc would grant protection to his people. Minutes later, the family arrives at the restaurant and, before saying goodbye, Paul asks why those people need protection. In response, Ray claims that there is a creature in the seas, which the natives call El Demonio. Convinced that it is all just a legend, Paul enters the restaurant with his family and receives a call from the company where he works, asking him to go and make the inspection immediately. Paul says goodbye to his wife and children and says that he will be back by sundown. When he arrives, he intends to take them to spend the weekend in a nearby town. After saying goodbye to his family, the man walks to the beach and rents a boat to reach the facility. On the way, he asks Chaco why there are so many boats destroyed on that beach, and the pilot says that people have abandoned the town for fear of El Demonio. Before reaching the final destination, Chaco makes a stop and informs him that from that point on, Paul will have to go alone by boat, because the way to the facility is very dangerous. At the restaurant, Ines is still waiting for her husband's return when a drunk man arrives at her table and begins to approach Audrey. To protect her daughter, the woman breaks a bottle over the man's head and threatens him with a shard of glass as she approaches the restaurant exit. The trio then runs to their car, but must find another way to escape, because they soon realize that they have punctured the tire of their vehicle. At that moment, Ines and her children run to the beach and the woman pays a pilot to take her to the facility where her husband is. Initially, the man states that he cannot take her, but changes his mind when he realizes that that family is in danger. As he approaches the platform, Paul realizes that there is a huge oil slick in the ocean and various diving equipment is floating around that place. However, he is not intimidated and goes ahead to finish his work as soon as possible. Once there, Paul begins to look for his colleagues, since during the phone call the man was informed that a team would be waiting for him. However, the building is apparently completely empty. After entering one of the lodgings, Paul spots a small dog and is soon surprised by the arrival of two men who are about to attack him. He quickly explains that he is an engineer sent by Nixon Oil to inspect the site and manages to reassure the pair. The men say that the radio communicator is not working and so they have not received any news for several days. Suddenly, Junior hears the noise of a boat approaching and Paul discovers that his family has gone after him. During the voyage, Tommy observes the ocean with a bezel and notices a large shadow passing well below the ship. The boat was about to be devoured when Shadow uses a flare to attract the shark's attention. Next, Junior starts banging on the bars and making noise to confuse the beast. At that moment, Paul sees his boat sinking and doesn't understand what is happening. Minutes later, his family finally makes it safely to the facility. However, as Audrey is getting off the boat, she falls into the sea and is distraught when she sees countless human limbs floating in the water. After being rescued, the young woman tells that she saw the bodies, but her father claims that she was just confused because of the oil that is spread everywhere. Meanwhile, the pilot flees at high speed and the couple asks Chato numerous questions, as they realize that something wrong is happening. At that moment, the man hands Ines a pair of binoculars and the woman is startled to see the boat that took her there being devoured by a giant shark. Only at this moment does Paul realize that El Demonio is real, and Chato tells him that he and Junior are the only lucky ones who managed to survive after arriving at the facility. When she realizes that there is no phone signal in that place, Ines panics and feels guilty for the death of the poor pilot, since she was the one who convinced him to go there. Worried for his wife, Paul tries to calm her down and his wife asks what that creature is. In that instant, Chato states that that is a megalodon, a giant shark species that scientists believe has been extinct for more than 2 million years. Apparently, El Demonio is the last representative of his species. Suddenly, the facility begins to be attacked and Paul asks his wife to hide with the children inside the quarters while he goes to find out what is going on. The only hope they have of getting out of that place alive is by air rescue. Since there is no power in the facility, Junior and Chato need to dive in to try to fix the electrical cables. In this way, Paul can fix the communicators to call for help. Before leaving, Chato tells his theory regarding Megalodon's existence and states that he is not there by chance. His people believe that the creature was sent by the gods as a way to punish mankind for destroying the forests, polluting the rivers, and eliminating all animals. Upon hearing this story, Paul is furious, because he does not believe in this nonsense and even less does he want his children to believe in superstitions. So, Chato decides to stop telling what he knows about that creature and the trio goes to put their plan into practice. The man hands Paul a camera so that he can keep an eye on them and says that he will give the signal when the diving equipment reaches the required depth. When the capsule stops, the duo dives into the ocean and goes to investigate what is preventing the generator from bringing power to the facility. When they get there, they find the bomb that Nacho placed before he was devoured and discover that in a few hours the place will explode. Suddenly, Junior begins to see several human limbs floating around close to him and goes into despair. Startled, he swims quickly back to the capsule, but the megalodon does not give up attacking him. The shark grabs the equipment with its giant mouth and pulls it to the bottom of the ocean. Paul tries to stop this from happening, but is unable to stop the cables. When it can no longer drag the capsule, the shark destroys it with its own teeth and only Chato manages to return to the surface. Seeing Junior's body floating in the water, Paul tries to save him. However, the man is already lifeless and his legs have been devoured. Audrey sees what has happened and panics, but tries to contain her emotions so as not to scare her younger brother, because the boy believes the situation is under control. After losing one of the members of his group, Paul realizes the gravity of the situation he has gotten himself into and his biggest concern is to keep his family safe from that monster. Seeing Ines crying with fear, Paul tries to console her and asks her forgiveness for having caused all that harm to her family. The man then promises that he will protect them and find a way to get his wife and children safely back home. After reassuring his family, Paul tries to comfort Chato and says that he is sorry for his loss. While they are talking, the engineer spots some ships approaching and begins to shout for help. He quickly grabs a flare to get the crew's attention, but Chato prevents him from doing so, as there is no ship nearby. The mirage is nothing more than a figment of Paul's imagination, and Chato claims that this happens to everyone who comes near the megalodon, because that shark has the power to mess with the minds of humans. Yet, even though he experiences all of this, Paul continues to scoff at the existence of Talak and claims that their beliefs are nothing more than superstition. Furious, Chato attacks him and Ines shows up to break up the fight before the argument gets even more serious. Paul then enters the quarters where his children are and Tommy asks if they will be eliminated in that place. Although he seems unaware of what is happening, the boy is an excellent observer and has noticed everything that is happening from the moment he arrived at that place. However, their father asserts that they will find a way home soon and asks for the children's help in looking for anything that might help them escape that platform. At this point, Ines realizes that her husband is only concerned with keeping the children busy and goes after him to ask Paul to accept help, because he is not alone. However, the man is not willing to work as a team and will put his new plan into practice alone. Despite their argument, Chato tries to remain friendly and offers to help the engineer with whatever he needs. Paul then tells him that he is looking for waterways to reroute the cooling system. In this way, he will get the generator working again, and then fix the radio. Meanwhile, the rest of the family is searching for tools and equipment that can help them escape, and Ines finds some old documents signed by her husband. As she reads them, the woman realizes that Paul is not as innocent as she thought. After rerouting the pipes, The engineer enlists the help of Chado to weld them together, and suddenly they both hear a plea for help from Tommy. The boy was at the edge of the ocean when the megalodon decided to attack the platform and he ended up falling into the water. Upon hearing her son's screams, Ines immediately jumps into the sea to save him and Paul goes after them to attract the shark's attention. Audrey then throws a float to pull her mother in, and when she realizes that her wife is safe, Paul swims back to the platform to try to save himself as the creature is heading in his direction. With the help of Chado, he manages to get out of the water and the whole family survives the attack. After grabbing a towel so that his wife can clean herself, Paul asks if she is all right and Ines decides to unmask him in front of the children. She claims to have seen Paul's signatures on security reports and accuses him of ignoring all warnings. If he had heeded the warnings, all of this could have been avoided and the lives of his family would not have been at risk. When he realizes that his wife has discovered the whole truth, Paul has to confess what he has done and says that he signed those documents so that he could move up in the company where he works, because he wanted to give his family financial stability. Upon hearing this, Ines states that her husband's job is to close down places like that and prevent the lives of the workers from being in danger. However, Paul has done just the opposite. Realizing that her husband is the real monster responsible for the eliminations of all those people, Ines can't hide her disappointment, and Paul feels extremely sorry for what he has done. The problem is that now it is too late. It takes less than an hour for the explosion to occur, and the engineer is able to restore electrical power to the facility. At this point, he realizes that he will not have enough time to fix the radio, so he must think of another way out of that place if he wants to save his family. Regretting the decisions he has made in the past, he decides to confess to Chado what he has done. It was his first year working at Nixon Oil when he came across the company's first irregularity. After surveying the facility, Paul wrote up his report and included in it all the dangers and deficiencies he had found. After delivering it, the next morning the engineer was called to a luxurious office and his executives asked if he was enjoying his new job. They then returned the report to him and began to suggest some changes, asking Paul to ignore the problems with the equipment. They hinted that if the man did not do this, they would find someone to put in his place. Since he was with a pregnant wife, Paul couldn't afford to lose that job, so he revised his report and made all the changes that were requested. After this episode, the engineer signed off on all the reports that the company delivered to him, and this went on for several years. He was forced to do this so that the businessmen could continue to make money while that small village was destroyed. After confessing his mistakes, Paul states that he had no idea that the situation was so bad. Seeing that bomb, he realized that he was sent there to serve as a scapegoat for Nixon Oil. The company intended to blow him up along with the installation to get rid of responsibility for the crimes they committed, since it is Paul's signature that is on the reports. Determined not to allow his family to suffer for the mistakes he has made, the engineer has an idea to get them out. Meanwhile, Chado tries to fix the radio to contact the coast. For a few seconds, he manages to communicate and send a distress call that is received by Chaco. Before he can have any answers, however, the equipment stops working again. Audrey and Tommy also want to contribute to the escape and start building a dinghy with the life jackets in order to float away from there. While his family prepares the vehicle that will allow them to escape, Paul thinks of a plan to blow up the megalodon. To do this, the man will have to dive in and get the monster to devour the bomb before it explodes. Upon hearing this plan, Chado tries to convince his friend that this is not the best way out, because he is in serious danger of not being able to escape in time. However, Paul knows that this is the only way to ensure his family's survival and he doesn't mind risking his own life to protect them, because he considers himself guilty for all the other lives lost in that facility. After saying goodbye to his family and saying a prayer dedicated to Talak, the man prepares his diving equipment and, before leaving, asks his wife to forgive him for the terrible mistakes he has made. He then tells them that there is a bomb in the facility and says that after deactivating it, he will go to the dinghy to find his family. Ines knows that this is an extremely risky mission and becomes worried about her husband. However, Paul states that his mind is at ease and asks his wife to keep the children safe. Chado asks what will happen if Paul can't escape before the explosion, and the engineer asks his friend to take care of his family and make sure the three of them get home safely. As soon as Paul enters the ocean, Chado begins his escape and takes everyone into the dinghy, including his pet dog. When the engineer finds the bomb, he discovers that there are only 5 minutes left until detonation, at which point he realizes that he will not be able to escape before the explosion. So the man wraps his own body with the explosive and closes the reservoir to prevent more oil from being released into the ocean. He is then spotted by the shark and manages to take shelter in a tower before being devoured by it. Meanwhile, his family rows away from the platform, and suddenly Ines receives a call from Paul. At this point, she discovers that her husband will not be able to save himself. The man asks Chato for forgiveness for all the harm he has caused him and his people and says that things will get better soon. He then asks to speak to his daughter and congratulates her for building that raft. He says he is very proud of the woman Audrey is becoming and asks her never to forget the strength she possesses. He then gives Tommy a message and congratulates the boy on his courage and willingness to explore the world. Then he asks him to take good care of his mother and sister. Finally, Paul says his last words to Ines and asks forgiveness for getting his family into that mess. He states that no matter what happens, he will always love his wife and promises that his spirit will visit her from time to time. After saying goodbye to his entire family, Paul comes out of his hiding place and goes to meet the shark, allowing his entire body to be devoured by it. At that moment, a huge explosion occurs and the monster is destroyed. Realizing that their father has lost his life, the children despair and Ines tries to console them. Minutes later, Audrey spots a boat approaching and Chato realizes that Chaco has received the distress call he sent over the radio. As the survivors are carried back to shore, they watch in relief as the entire facility is sunk into the ocean. So what did you think of this movie? Leave it in the comments below. And if you liked the video, please like and subscribe for more movie recaps. See you next time.